Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked into a woman's eyes and felt like she was trying to tell you something, but the words never quite came out? Not in English, not in text, not even in silence. Just a subtle energy, a look that lingered, a moment that felt important. And yet, you missed it. Not because you didn't care, but because no one ever taught you to see what wasn't obvious. You see, what a woman truly craves, it's not always spoken. It's not always grand. Often it hides behind a smile, a question, a small gesture that means everything if you know how to read it. And here's the truth many men never hear: women are not just waiting for love. They're waiting to be understood without having to explain themselves. In this video, we're going to explore 5 of those hidden desires. Not cliches, not tricks, but deep, emotional currents that live beneath the surface of every romantic relationship. The kind of truths that change how you see women forever and how they see you. This isn't about manipulation. This is about mastery, emotional, relational mastery, the kind that makes a woman feel seen, chosen, safe, and alive. So sit back, stay with me, and let's begin. Have you ever been lying next to a woman, maybe after a long day or a quiet dinner, and suddenly felt this silence between you that wasn't empty but full of something you couldn't quite name? She didn't seem upset, she didn't seem distant. But there was something there just beneath the surface, and maybe you ignored it. Maybe you touched her shoulder or made a joke to fill the space. But what you missed in that moment wasn't just a mood. It was an invitation, a whisper, a craving. You see, women have a way of communicating that isn't always loud. In fact, the loudest things they feel are often the ones they never say, not because they want to be mysterious or difficult, but because there's a part of intimacy that isn't meant to be explained. It's meant to be felt, and that's what we're here for. There are 5 hidden things women deeply crave from the men in their lives. They are not transactional. They are not about money or muscles or status. These are emotional desires, and when a man understands them, not just intellectually, but relationally, he becomes unforgettable. So let's begin with the first. It's the desire to be emotionally mirrored. No, not agreed with, not rescued, not even fixed. Mirrored. To mirror a woman emotionally means to reflect back to her not the solution, but the feeling. When she says, "I had a really frustrating day," and your first impulse is to fix it, resist that. Don't offer her 3 solutions and a motivational speech. Instead, try, "That sounds exhausting. I can imagine that made you feel totally unheard." And then stop, let it land, watch what happens to her body language. Women crave this because they live in a world that constantly demands they justify how they feel. At work, in family, in society. And when they come home to you, the man they've chosen, they don't want another manager or life coach. They want a mirror, one that says, "I see you, I hear you, and your emotions make sense." This doesn't make you weak, it makes you fluent. Emotionally fluent. And it is so rare that when a man shows up this way, a woman remembers it for life. Now, let's move deeper. The second hidden craving is the freedom to unfold without being judged. Most women carry a dual burden: the need to be everything and the fear of being too much, too emotional, too passionate, too independent, too needy, too wild. And often, even in relationships, they are performing, editing, filtering. So when she's with a man who doesn't just allow her to be complex, but welcomes it, something profound happens. Her nervous system relaxes, her sensuality returns, her laughter deepens. She stops holding her breath. Have you ever seen a woman become more beautiful over time? It wasn't makeup, it wasn't age reversing. It was this: she felt emotionally safe enough to expand. And that safety wasn't because the man was perfect. It was because he didn't flinch when she showed all her parts, her joy, her anger, her doubt, her desire. Instead of retreating, he leaned in and said, "I can hold this, all of this." It's in that emotional space that real intimacy happens. Because trust isn't built in the easy moments. It's built in the moments where she risks showing you something raw, and you stay. Now, this doesn't mean you abandon your boundaries or disappear into her emotions. It means you understand that her complexity isn't a problem. It's an offering. And how you receive it determines the depth of the bond you create. Let's pause here for a moment and breathe this in. Because if you're a man watching this and you've ever felt like women are impossible to understand, maybe it's because no one ever showed you how to listen beyond the words. How to notice the space between sentences, the shift in her eyes when she says she's fine, the way her voice tightens when she talks about her dreams. These are not signs of weakness. They are invitations into the inner world of a woman who wants to be known. And this brings us to the third desire, one that might surprise you. Women secretly crave erotic tension that isn't purely sexual. And here's what I mean. For so many men, attraction becomes a goal, a destination, a performance. But for women, especially women over 30, desire lives in the build-up, not the outcome. She wants to feel like there is still mystery between you, that you can look at her from across the room and make her feel like the only woman alive. Not because you touched her, but because you saw her with your whole being. Women crave a man who doesn't just want her, but plays with the wanting. A man who can sit in silence, leaning close, and let the air between them hum with the electricity of restraint, not rush, not pressure, but presence. Presence is everything. And yes, sex matters, but what matters more is that she feels chosen, not just in bed, but in energy, in attention, in the tone of your voice when you say her name like it's your favorite word. Too often men confuse sex with connection, but when you know how to cultivate erotic tension, not just in the bedroom but in life, you awaken a part of her that feels desired on a soul level. And that, my friend, is unforgettable. So the next time she walks by you in the kitchen, don't just touch her out of habit. Stop. Look. Let your eyes say what your mouth doesn't. Let her feel that she is still a mystery worth unraveling. It's not about doing more. It's about doing less with more intention. So far, we've talked about emotional mirroring, freedom without judgment, and the power of erotic tension beyond the physical. These are not techniques. These are ways of being with a woman that allow her to exhale, to rise, to love from a place of fullness. And if this feels new to you, good, that means you're growing. That means something is waking up inside you. Something that understands love is not about control. It's about attunement. And that's where we'll go next. What does it mean to be attuned to someone? Not just listening with your ears, but feeling with your body, reading the pauses in her voice like punctuation in a poem, noticing when her words say yes, but her eyes whisper no. This is the art of presence that makes a woman feel not just understood, but felt. It's a rare intimacy, a kind of emotional intelligence that doesn't shout. It leans in quietly and says, I see what you didn't say. And this brings us to the fourth hidden craving: emotional leadership. Now, when I say leadership, I do not mean domination. I do not mean control. I mean clarity, direction, the ability to hold space and offer certainty when she feels lost in her own storm. Because whether she's soft or strong, gentle or fierce, every woman has moments where she wants to surrender her weight into the hands of someone who knows how to hold it. This doesn't mean she's weak. Quite the opposite. It means she's exhausted from carrying so much. And when a man shows emotional leadership, not by barking orders, but by offering grounded presence, something softens in her. She no longer has to be the one holding it all together. So what does this look like? It's when she says, I don't know what to do about this situation. And instead of telling her what she should do, you say, let's slow down. Let's look at it together. We'll figure it out. I'm with you. That phrase, I'm with you, is more powerful than any solution you could offer, because now she's not alone. She's not performing strength for you. She's not managing your discomfort. She's safe to be uncertain. Women crave this kind of leadership because in today's world, they are constantly expected to lead. At work, at home, in relationships. And sometimes what she desires most is to rest, not in passivity, but in trust. Trust that you won't collapse under pressure, that you won't disappear when things get messy, that you know who you are, and in knowing yourself, you can meet her where she is without fear. There is nothing more masculine than being calm in chaos. Not because you know all the answers, but because you know how to stay. This kind of steadiness doesn't come from force. It comes from integration. A man who is emotionally integrated doesn't panic when his partner is upset. He doesn't deflect, avoid, or blame. He stands in it. Not to dominate her, but to join her without becoming lost in her emotions. You see, emotional leadership isn't loud. It's quiet, grounded confidence. It's knowing when to speak and when to simply sit with her pain without making it about you. And that is the man she will turn to again and again when the world feels too heavy to carry alone. But there is one more craving that lives even deeper, often buried beneath layers of past hurt, of broken trust, of time wasted with men who couldn't see her value. It is the desire to be chosen over and over again, not out of obligation, not because she's useful, not because it's convenient, but because she's heard. This final secret is not about being selected once during the honeymoon phase or the Instagram-worthy dates. It's about being chosen every day, in small ways, in the little decisions, in the moments when no one's watching. You know what choosing looks like? It's when you listen to her speak about something she's passionate about, and your eyes don't glaze over. It's when you notice she's been quiet for too long, and you check in not with suspicion, but with care. It's when you introduce her to your friends, and you speak of her like she's the woman you still can't believe chose you. Women don't want to beg to be seen. They want to be picked with presence. Chosen, not just because she's beautiful. Chosen because you remember who she is when she forgets. Chosen when she's messy, when she's scared, when she's grieving, when she's laughing uncontrollably at 2 a.m. because something reminded her of her childhood. Chosen not because she's perfect, but because she's yours to choose. And here's where most men misunderstand. They think that choosing is over once commitment begins. But that's where it starts, because real devotion isn't made of one grand gesture. It's made of 1,000 invisible ones. Every time you show up when you'd rather shut down. Every time you hold her gaze instead of picking up your phone. Every time you say, you matter to me, not just in words, but in how you treat her when she's not easy to love. Do you know what it does to a woman when she's chosen like that? She blossoms, she glows, she becomes unapologetically herself, because now she's not just surviving in the relationship, she's thriving, she's creating. She's giving from overflow, not depletion. And the man who unlocks that version of her, he receives the kind of love that no performance or persuasion could ever earn. And maybe you've never seen that version of a woman. Maybe your past relationships have been filled with misunderstanding, distance, or unmet needs. Maybe you felt like no matter what you did, it wasn't enough. But let me offer you this. It's not about doing more, it's about doing deeper. These 5 cravings, mirroring emotional freedom, erotic energy, grounded leadership, and chosen presence, aren't just random wishes. They are the emotional blueprint of connection. They are the architecture of safety, the roots of desire. And when you begin to see them, not just as concepts, but as opportunities, you start showing up in a way that makes you not only attractive, but irreplaceable. Because here's the thing. Any man can touch her body, few can touch her soul, and that's what this is about. It's not about being impressive, it's about being intimate, it's not about being perfect, it's about being present, it's not about knowing everything, it's about knowing her, even when she's quiet, when you become the man who listens between the lines, who holds space with strength, who leads with gentleness and loves with consistency. You become the home she never knew she needed. And now we go even further. The man who becomes a woman's home isn't the one who promises her everything. It's the one who shows up when no one is watching. The one who learns her without asking her to explain. Who studies her rhythms the way a poet studies the ocean. Not to conquer it, but to honor it. You see, love in the beginning is easy. It's new. It's dopamine. It's possibility. But what she truly craves, what all women secretly ache for, is what happens after the honeymoon fades, after the spark becomes a flicker, when daily life sneaks in, and the noise of routines begins to drown out the music of romance. That's when her deepest needs come to the surface. And one of those needs, she wants to be remembered, not in the grand sense, not in bouquets or surprise trips, but in the small, almost invisible ways. She wants to be remembered when she says, "I don't like strawberries in my smoothie," and 2 months later, you make her one without them. She wants to be remembered when she's had a long day, and instead of asking what's wrong, you just hold her, not because she asked, but because you knew. She wants to be remembered when she walks into a room and your eyes light up like it's the first time, even though it's the 1,000th. Being remembered is not about memory, it's about care. It's the subtle art of holding on to who she is when even she forgets. And when you remember her, not just facts about her, but the essence of her, something in her relaxes, because now she knows she doesn't have to work to be seen. And let me tell you something, when a woman no longer has to perform in order to be loved, she transforms. She no longer doubts, she no longer guards, she opens. Fully. But if that doesn't happen, if she's constantly reminding, repeating, reintroducing herself to the man who claims to love her, she will slowly start to disappear. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. Her voice gets quieter, her touch becomes mechanical, her laughter, once effortless, starts to feel rehearsed, and often, the man won't even notice until she's already gone. You see, so many relationships don't die from betrayal, they die from neglect, from not being tended to, from not being nourished in the small moments where love either grows or dries up. That's why remembering her matters, not because she's fragile, but because love is. It's a living, breathing thing, and women crave a man who understands this, who doesn't just love her, but tends to that love like a garden, watering it, checking in, noticing when something feels off before it becomes a problem. This is not weakness, this is awareness. And awareness is what separates the man she settles for from the man she chooses. And let's talk about choice for a moment, because there's another craving we don't talk about enough. Women want to feel like the center of your attention, even when they're not the center of your world. Let me explain. She doesn't need you to worship her. She doesn't need you to lose your mission, your focus, your ambition. In fact, a woman over 30 will not respect a man who abandons himself for her. But what she does crave is to know that amidst all your striving, your climbing, your becoming, she matters. She's not a background character in the movie of your life. She is a meaningful part of the story. It's when you're with your friends and you speak about her with respect. It's when you're at work and you still send her that text that says, "Thinking of you." It's when she walks into a room and for a brief moment, everything else fades. Women crave relevance in your heart, not just presence in your home. Because a woman can be in your bed every night and still feel emotionally abandoned. She can be cooking dinner, planning your weekends, managing the household, and still question whether she matters to you in a way that's felt. So let me ask you, when was the last time you looked at her like you were proud to have her? Not as a possession, but as a partner. When was the last time you spoke to her like she was the one person who could truly understand you, not because you had to explain yourself, but because she gets you in ways no one else does? When a woman feels like she's central to your life, not in dominance, but in value, she offers a level of love that is spiritual. She becomes your mirror, your muse, your healer, your co-creator. But if she feels peripheral, replaceable, she will start to withhold the most sacred parts of herself, not out of revenge, Out of protection, women don't shut down overnight. They shut down over time. With each small moment that says, you're not a priority, she lowers the volume of her heart, and eventually it becomes quiet, and then gone. So how do you bring her back? You bring her back by choosing her in the ordinary, by remembering her in the chaos, by making her feel like she matters, even when everything else demands your focus. Because here's what you may not realize. When a woman feels adored, she becomes limitless. Her creativity flourishes. Her body becomes more alive. Her energy overflows. Not because you gave her something external, but because you gave her something internal, the experience of being treasured. And this is the paradox. The more you cherish her, the less she needs you, but the more she chooses you every day, willingly, eagerly, joyfully, because a woman who feels safe and seen does not leave. She doesn't need to seek attention elsewhere. She doesn't fantasize about someone else. She turns her entire being toward the man who makes her feel like the sun. And if you've never experienced a woman loving you like that, wholeheartedly, wildly, and with all the fire in her soul, then perhaps no one ever taught you how to tend to her emotional world the way it deserves. But now you're learning, and what a gift that is. What a gift it is indeed, to be a man who chooses to learn how to love, not just loudly but wisely. Because here's the truth, very few will tell you women don't fall in love with what you do for them. They fall in love with how they feel about themselves when they're with you. That's the invisible thread that ties it all together. That's the emotional alchemy. It's not about being a provider in the traditional sense anymore. It's about being an emotional provider. Can you offer a space where her femininity is safe to be unguarded, where her soul isn't competing for air, but dancing in your presence? Because what she secretly craves, beyond all the touch and talk and time, is to feel alive in your company. Not just because you stimulate her mind, or satisfy her body, or support her dreams, but because with you, she rediscovers forgotten parts of herself, the playful girl, the confident woman, the curious explorer, the sensual lover, the divine creator, all of her. When a man evokes that in a woman, he becomes unforgettable, not because he possesses her, but because he awakens her. And that awakening is tied to something so often overlooked, yet deeply craved, emotional curiosity. Yes, that's another hidden longing. She wants you to be curious about her, not interrogate her, not study her like a project, but be genuinely fascinated with her inner world. Ask her, what made you feel the most loved as a child? Or, when did you first feel like you had to grow up too soon? Or, what would your life look like if fear wasn't driving the steering wheel? These are the questions that make her feel known, not just seen, not just heard, but explored. Too many relationships grow stale not because love disappears, but because curiosity dies. We stop asking, we assume. We say, I know who you are, when in fact she is always evolving, always shifting. She's not the same woman you met 3 years ago. She's gone through her own inner revolutions. And when you stop being curious, you lose the thread of who she's becoming. Women crave a man who doesn't just fall in love with who she was, but stays in love with who she's becoming. This curiosity isn't about being nosy. It's about being invested. It's saying, I care enough to keep learning you, even when she's moody, even when she's silent, even when she pulls away, not because she wants distance, but because she wants to see if you'll pursue her with presence, not pressure. That pursuit, that gentle leaning in, is not about control. It's about care. And what makes it even more powerful is when it comes without condition. Not, tell me your story so I can fix you, but tell me your story so I can feel you. Women crave that. A man who's not afraid of the chapters that don't make sense. A man who doesn't flinch at her darkness, who doesn't run from her depth. Because here's the reality. If you want a woman with passion, with wisdom, with soul, you will also get a woman with scars. And those scars are not a warning sign. They are a map. And when you trace them with reverence, not pity, you begin to understand that real love isn't about healing her. It's about honoring the journey she's already survived. Now, let's talk about what happens when you do this. When a woman feels seen this way, she becomes more than a partner. She becomes a mirror of your own emotional evolution. You begin to feel yourself rising too. Not because she's lifting you up, but because you are rising with her. This is what mature intimacy looks like. It's not about fixing each other. It's about holding each other accountable to stay awake, to keep growing, to keep discovering. And in that process, a new kind of connection is born, one that's not fragile, but forged in truth. Let me give you a moment of contrast. Think of a man who listens to his woman speak, but his eyes flicker toward the TV. His phone buzzes, and he checks it mid-conversation. He hears her voice, but he's not in it. Now think of a man who's sitting with her on the couch. He leans in. His body is turned toward her. His face softens when she speaks. There's a pause in his breath as he listens, not to respond, but to receive. No distractions, just her. Just now, which man does she crave? And more importantly, which man do you want to be? Because this isn't just about women. This is about the man you become when you begin to love with this level of depth, curiosity, and integrity. You become a man who no longer fears intimacy because he knows it's not weakness, it's power. You become a man who leads with love that's rooted, not reckless. You become a man whose presence is healing, not demanding. And the women around you, whether lovers, sisters, friends, or strangers, feel it. You become the kind of man who makes a woman pause, not because of your status or your style, but because of the energy you carry. Grounded, open, safe. And you know what happens when a woman feels safe? She stops over-explaining. She stops apologizing for her fire. She simply shows up in full color, in her softness and her power. And together you begin to create a connection that is not based on need, but on choice. This is rare, this is sacred, and this is what she's been craving, perhaps without ever saying it out loud. You've just begun to taste the edges of this truth. There's more, there's always more, because love is not a destination, it's an exploration. So here we are at the end, but also at the beginning. Because what you've been learning, what you've been feeling deep in your chest as you listened, isn't just information, it's invitation. The kind of invitation that doesn't come with instructions, but with presence. Because now you know what a woman secretly craves isn't something you can buy. It's not something you can Google. And it's not something you can fake. It is something you become. When you are the man who mirrors her emotions, not to fix her, but to feel her, she breathes differently in your arms. When you allow her to unfold without judgment, she stops editing herself around you. When you cultivate erotic energy that lives in the space between your fingertips and your silence, she craves you before you even touch her. When you lead emotionally, not with force, but with steadiness, she rests inside your presence like it's home. And when you choose her, again and again, not out of duty but out of devotion, she glows, she grows, she gives from the deepest parts of her. And here's the final truth, it's not just about her. When you love a woman this way, you change too. You stop living on the surface of things. You stop hiding behind sarcasm and sex and success. You start asking better questions. You start feeling more yourself, your past, your longings, your fears. You begin to step into a version of manhood that doesn't armor up, it opens up, vulnerably, powerfully, authentically, because the man who can love a woman like this is a man who has learned to sit with himself, to hold his own shadows, to welcome his own contradictions, and in doing so, he becomes the kind of man who can truly hold another soul. That's why this matters. This isn't about getting the girl. This is about becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to chase, because everything he attracts is a reflection of the depth he's already cultivated within himself. And I know maybe no one ever showed you this before. Maybe you grew up with role models who taught you that feelings were weakness, that vulnerability was dangerous, that being in control was safer than being connected. But that script, it's outdated. The modern woman does not want a man who controls her. She wants a man who chooses her freely, fully, and without fear. She wants a man who is strong enough to hold her tenderness, soft enough to invite her fire, wise enough to let her be her, without trying to turn her into something safer, smaller, simpler. And maybe right now, as you sit here, something inside you is stirring, a realization, a regret, a longing. Maybe you're thinking of the woman you hurt because you didn't know how to listen, or the one who left because she never felt chosen, or the one who stayed but shrank because you didn't make room for all of her. If that's what you're feeling right now, don't turn away from it. Don't numb it. Breathe into it. Because that discomfort, that ache, that's where the growth begins. You don't need to shame yourself for who you used to be. You just need to decide who you're willing to become now. And the beauty of love, real conscious, grown-up love, is that it always leaves the door open for transformation, as long as you're willing to walk through it. So let this be your beginning. Let this be the moment where you stop asking, what do women want? And start asking, who am I when I show up fully present, deeply attuned and emotionally available? Because when you ask that question, you unlock everything. You unlock the kind of connection that doesn't need a label to feel real. You unlock the kind of intimacy that lasts, not because it's easy, but because it's honest. You unlock the kind of love that isn't just romantic, it's revolutionary. And that's what she's been craving. Not perfection, but your presence. So I leave you with this: let your touch be intentional, let your silence be safe, let your words be slow enough to hold truth, and let your love be brave enough to go where others avoid. Because in a world full of noise, the man who listens is a symphony. In a culture obsessed with appearances, the man who feels is unforgettable. And in a time where most people are guarding their hearts, the man who opens his becomes a miracle. That's who you are becoming. So go, love deeper, lead softer, see her and choose her. Not because she needs saving, but because in choosing her, you're finally choosing yourself too. Now, if this resonated with you, I invite you to do something incredibly important. Drop a comment below. Not just a thumbs up, but a piece of your story. Tell me what part of this spoke to you. Tell me where you've struggled or where you've grown. And if you know a man who needs to hear this, share it with him. Let this conversation expand. Let this kind of love ripple outward. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. There's more coming. More truth, more healing, more connection. Because this is just the beginning. Here's to a love that feels like home. Here's to the man you're becoming. Here's to choosing each other, not just once but always.